All right. Hands up. Don't shoot. Like this? Pretty cool, huh? All right. Good evening, everybody. Jim Williams for my annual hurricane season kickoff show. What's going on in the country right now is crazy. I'm going to touch on that first before I get to the hurricane season, which starts today. We have a tropical depression out there. I'll get to the graphics on that in just a minute. Before I get started on the commentary on the events that are leading up to this hurricane season and my comments on my predictions and everything else, I want to talk a little bit about myself. Some of you out there may be watching for the first time. I'd love to hear from you, actually. If you would like to email me, jim@hurricanecity.com, or you can simply go on the Facebook and check that out as well, and post in the commentary where people are having a chat, whatnot. By the way, I'll be monitoring that tonight, so if anybody has comments in the comments section, ask questions over there, or simply email me, or I guess that's it. That's the only way you're going to be able to reach me. But anyway, for those that are new, I'd love to hear from you. So I know I've been doing this for a long time. It's 23 years now. Hurricane City has been online. I've been doing these shows since like the late 90s. I've covered probably about 25 hurricanes. I've been in 10 hurricanes. I've been in the eye of 3 hurricanes. Recently, Michael in 2018. I was in Hurricane Wilma in 2005, the eye of Hurricane Wilma, and Hurricane Irene in 1999. So those are my 3 I was in the eye of all those hurricanes, and I've been in a lot of eye walls. I was in the eye wall of Matthew. I was in Hurricane George in 1998 up in Mississippi. I've had numerous hurricanes, Francis, Jean, several that have crisscrossed Florida that I've been in, and multiple tropical storms. But I've covered a lot of these hurricanes over the year. Not feeling very well tonight, so if I start coughing or something, I have allergies and whatnot, so you'll just have to deal with it. Anyway, we've covered a lot of hurricanes, and my co-host Bill Phillips up in Virginia Beach, he's not with me tonight, but we cover these hurricanes when they're hitting anywhere, especially if they're majors. We do live coverage. We show radars. We do radio stations, live cameras from the affected areas, storm chaser video. There's a lot of storm chasers in these storms. And we put together what's called an archive, and it lasts about an hour. And we post it on the video archive page, which, by the way, this show will be on that page as well. But if you use the drop-down menus at Hurricane City, look for video archives, and you'll get all the shows since the late 90s, early 2000s. Well, actually, I don't have any from the late 90s. I do have my 98 Hurricane George video up there, which is kind of amusing. Me and storm chaser Jeff Gammons, we were up there in Mississippi, and, this is kind of the beginning of the storm chase deal. And it's pretty comical. There's a lot of funny stuff in there. But anyway, it's back when technology was in its infancy. We didn't have live streaming, and, it was a different ballgame. And over the years, the technology has gotten better. If you go back and look at some of my old archives from the early 2000s, they're kind of train wrecks, to be honest with you. But we did cover a lot of those hurricanes hitting landfall. We got storm chaser videos from people like Mark Sudduth that have been doing this for a long time. And we posted it up and mix it in with all the newscasts and everything, and kind of make it a presentation for people to go back and kind of relive what happened in their community as a hurricane was hitting. So just to let you know, I've been doing this since I was a kid. Middle school age, I had a big tracking chart that fills up the entire wall, like a huge chart that I drew by hand. I have one up here right now off to the side. I can't show it to you, but it only tracks Category 5 hurricanes through the years. But now people might ask, how come you're not a meteorologist? And I would like to think I'm pretty good at this. My predictions have been stellar since 2003. I've been predicting where hurricanes are going to hit, and only had 2 bad years, to be honest with you, where none of my top 5 were impacted. I'll show you that, a little bit of those graphics in a few minutes as well. obsession with hurricanes started by watching it on television in the late 70s, early 80s. I became obsessed with hurricanes. It wasn't any particular hurricane that I was in that got me into this. It's just an obsession with it overall. The media coverage, the hype surrounding hurricanes making landfall, the excitement, the news coverage. It's just, to me, it's an event. It's a life-changing event for many people. And that's what got me interested in it, not to mention the drawing of the maps and all that. So back in 1997, I joined a web hosting platform called GeoCities, and then it flourished into taking the code and adding to the code and creating my site basically from scratch. And I'm going to show you some of the stuff that's on the site. If you haven't been to Hurricane City, it's a database of all 140 cities. It's got real-time tracking. It's got the best performing models. It's got all the shows that I've done over the years, tropical update videos, which I don't really do anymore. Let's see, interviews with well-known hurricane forecasters and people over the years, famous people from all across the weather business. Let's see, I have the database, my predictions. I have a ranking system for who gets hit most by tropical storms and hurricanes. It breaks it down city by city. So it's quite an extensive amount of work. And so I think I'm qualified to speak on hurricanes. I've been doing this a long time. I know you're going to say, well, you didn't graduate from Florida State University. You didn't go to Penn State. I didn't go to college. Okay, I'm a contractor by trade. What I do, I have a paving business. So when I do this stuff, it takes a lot of my time. And that's why I ask for donations. The donations are critical to the existence of Hurricane City. If you go to the Facebook page, on the left-hand navigation bar, there's a donation link, which leads you to the donation page. You can donate with PayPal, here we go. There we go. You're going to hear that through the show, a lot of coughing, but I also have allergies, so, try to bear with me. Anyway, you can donate at Facebook. You can go to the website, Hurricane City. There's drop-down menus. There's all kinds of different links to donate. What I do is I donate I don't donate. I release my predictions and send them to the people that donate. It hasn't always been this way. I used to release them publicly. Since 2003, I've released my predictions publicly. They've been getting better almost every single year, to the point where it's almost, if I say your city's in the top 5, there's a pretty good chance that your city's going to get impacted during this hurricane season. I'll show you all those graphics tonight. The only reason I'm doing this tonight is because of the horrific state of our country right now, and I'll get into that in a minute. But I think after everything everybody's been through, with the thought of a hurricane season upon us, and all expectations are it's going to be busy, people are nervous. There's a lot of anxiety out there. I understand it, so I decided to go ahead this year and release it publicly. I did release it to my donation list about 2 weeks ago, so everybody got an early shot at the predictions. I told people you're welcome to share it on social media if you'd like. You don't have to, but it's okay to do that. In fact, I encourage it this year. But normally I just give it to those people that donate. Problem is, when I started doing that, I thought, well, I can grow a decent donation list. It just didn't happen. I mean, I've got I'm going to be honest with you, maybe 50 people that they give me be anywhere between $20 and $100 a year. And so that's what I'm working on. It's fumes. This is a labor of love, but the money is needed because I have to go out of my way to do all this stuff. It's not like, and don't get me wrong, I do enjoy it, but at times it's taxing. Like when I show you the amount of work that goes into these predictions, you're not going to believe it. And you're going to think, how did you do this when you're running a business? And how do you cover hurricanes when you're running a business? And how do you do all that? So to me, you're rewarding me for putting this work into this project, which quite frankly, I've thought about giving it up a few times already over the years. I've made announcements that I'm cutting things back. I'm getting rid of this. I'm getting rid of that. I thought about getting rid of the whole site, to be honest with you. It's too much work. And especially during the hurricane, well, it's mainly during the hurricane season, it's too much work. So I was ready to dump it. I've been ready to dump it the last couple of years. People that know me personally know this. And the donations are the only thing that keep me going on this, to be honest with you. I'm not an invest guy. I watch social media and I see everybody invest 91L, invest 92L, invest 93, tropical depression number 3. Like this system, for all intents and purposes, this system might end up being nothing. Okay, it could end up being just a depression or maybe become a tropical storm. It'll be another name checked off the list. Cristobal is the next name. It'll go down, might dive down into Mexico, and it may never regenerate. It may never make it back out into the Gulf. Decent chance that it will, but there's a chance it won't. And I can't tell you the amount of shows that I've done over the years where I have talked about an invest or a tropical depression or a weak tropical storm that never ended up amounting to anything, and I spent the entire 45 minutes dwelling on a weak system that's never going to mount. So I'm not going to spend tonight talking about TD number 3, but I will show you the graphics and the best performing models on it and give you my opinion where I think it's going to go, but I'm not going to dwell on it. It's just, I'm not, like I said, I don't have the time, and I'm not going to sit here day after day after day dwelling on an invest. And just to let you know, during the course of an average hurricane season, you're going to recycle that invest list. There's 10 invests. It starts at 90L and goes up to 99L and then starts over again. That list is going to recycle probably 30 times during the course of the hurricane season. You think about that, that's like, I don't know, 500 or something invest that you're going to get, and this year maybe 15 or 20 of them are going to develop, and that's your percentages of these invests that turn into something. So I'm not going to sit there and dwell on that day in and day out throughout the hurricane season. I think people's nerves are on edge. This country has been brought to its knees with COVID-19 and the latest on the rioting and everything, the protest with George Floyd, and also the COVID-19 making a comeback in 15 states right now. I think it's going to be a big problem during the hurricane season, especially as we get late in the hurricane season. So I don't want to freak people out talking about a tropical storm, an invest, or a tropical depression that probably won't amount to anything and get everybody whipped up into a frenzy. I just don't respect that at all on the internet. And I know there are people that live and breathe every low-pressure system in the Atlantic Basin. For those of you that have been following me for years, know that I'm not a bullshit artist, okay? If I get out here and I'm doing a show like I'm doing tonight, it's for a reason. I'm not going to sit there and waste my time on tropical depressions and weak tropical storms. I'm about the big boys. If you got a major threat coming, you got a major metropolitan area ready to be slammed by a hurricane, to me it's all hands on deck, but not for these weak systems. So I just wanted to let you know, don't expect me to do that this year. I'm busy. I don't have the time, and I think there's bigger fish to fry right now. But I just wanted to let you know with my opening statements that I am experienced with this. I've tracked numerous hurricanes over the last 30, 40 years. And when I say make a prediction or think about what some model is projecting into the future, and by the way, I don't do that either. You'll never see me post a 14-day model run. Not going to happen. I'm not posting 10-day GFS. You're not going to see me do that because those models flip-flop too much. They're going to flip-flop all over the place. You're not going to get any consistency. I'm not going to have any egg on my face. People have been following me for years because they know when I get worried about something, it's something to get worried about. Then don't get me wrong, there's been hurricanes in the past where I got caught off guard, where they ended up being bigger than what I thought they were going to be. Like Sandy comes to mind. Sandy is the one that gnaws at me. Sandy has got Hurricane Sandy. Oh, I hate that storm. It's the one that got away from me because the models were like split on that. The GFS, the Euro, the Euro had it recurving into the United States. GFS had it going up into the Canadian Maritimes, and I was buying the GFS, man. And I got burned big time. The Euro got it. It went right into New Jersey, and the rest is history. But I really thought that thing was heading out to sea. But other than that, I have an excellent track record. And when I get into my predictions, I'm going to tell you about some of the forecasting that I've done before the season even started, giving you an idea where these things are going to go with high amount of accuracy. And not only that, just to give you an example, Hurricane Katrina, 2005. before the season started in 2005, I had the northern central Gulf Coast pegged, and I was heavily, most of you that pay attention to my predictions know that it's where's my phone button? Oh, here it is. I'm just keeping track in case there's any issues. I usually will have my top 5 kind of spread out. It might be Texas, South Carolina, New York, South Florida, something like that, right? In 2005, I had all the weight in the northern central Gulf Coast. And I said in a video before the season started, I expect there could be a high death toll because New Orleans is right there. And I have a bad feeling about this hurricane season. And that's exactly what happened in 2005. Hurricane Katrina hit Mississippi. New Orleans got flooded. The levees collapsed. 1,800 people are dead. And there you go. But I called it before the season started. Nobody else was calling for that to happen before the season started. So that's just one season. I've got numerous like that where I've called it. So pay close attention tonight when I tell you if you need to be concerned this hurricane season. And even if I don't have you on my list, it doesn't mean you don't need to be concerned. Everybody needs to be on guard. So anyway, those are my opening lines about my experience with this. And you can choose not to listen to me. You can think, well, you're not from Florida State and you're not with the Hurricane Center, so who gives a shit what he says? That's the attitude out there. It's kind of juvenile. I know people are obsessed with credentials. I get it, but you got to look at somebody's track record and say, this guy gets it. So come back and visit us during the hurricane season. I'll show you the tracking page. It's got a lot of data on it. I built those GIS maps. I put all the layers into it. Chris Hollis has designed fabulous KML files to go into those maps, and he's also worked on the Hurricane Hunter program, and he helps edit Hurricane City as well. And again, Bill Phillips helps me do the broadcast when hurricanes come in. Sometimes they become 24-hour marathons, so I appreciate those two guys helping with Hurricane City over the years, and we'll be doing it again this year. Okay, now my thoughts on one thing before, because I want to make sure everybody's hearing us okay and everything's checking out here. Okay. All right, so everything's checking out on the audio levels. Okay, so let me get all right. Now, again, those of you that are just joining me tonight, I'm Jim Williams, HurricaneCity.com, Hurricane Season Kickoff Show. Been doing these since 2000 and I don't know how many years I've been doing the shows, the kickoff shows anyway. I know I've been doing the predictions since 2003. The shows, I think, was 1999, 2000. We did a lot of kickoff shows. I have different people in the studio here with me doing all the shows, and there's all the archives on the archive page. You want to check it out. It's pretty interesting stuff. But anyway, all right, the State of the Union. Folks, I'm going to be 58 years old coming up here in September. And in all my years on this planet, I've never seen such a tumultuous time that our country is going through right now. And I'm going to be frank about this. It started in a meat market in one of these, what do they call this? Definitely not fresh. Well, maybe you could call it a fresh market. These markets over in China. And apparently, from all the science I've read, and I know there's conspiracies that the COVID-19 came from a lab, and, it's possible. But I still think it's somebody ate something they weren't supposed to. It mixed with something else. Something bad got in somebody's system. They go out coughing on a few people. It spreads, and it's happened before. So this all started in a meat market over in China somewhere, and it's led to where we're at right now. We have 105,000 people dead in this country. And I'm going to tell you something. I don't care if we have 5 major hurricanes hit the United States this year. We're never going to see the death toll that we have just experienced from COVID-19. And what we will experience in the second round, because I believe this is going to spread everywhere, the people out there on the streets, 10% aren't wearing masks. A lot of people are, but there's some that aren't. We've had crowds of people partying, going to the beaches, not wearing masks. I see reporters in the middle of crowds not wearing masks. It's inevitable that COVID-19 is going to make a roaring comeback. So it's going to happen in the hurricane season. It's going to affect evacuations. It's going to be a different hurricane season. And this is why I told you I'm not going to try to alarm anybody with a bunch of nonsense when people's nerves are already shot. But listen, this thing is spreading. It's going to spread again, and it's going to be a big, huge problem. And it has rubbed, and believe me, these protests you're seeing about George, I keep forgetting the guy's name, George Floyd. I don't know how I can forget his name. But the George Floyd protests are a result partially of COVID-19. People are aggravated. They're upset. We have a very tense nation right now. I've never seen anything like it. The country is on edge. We have no leadership. The president has been silent on this for the most part. He's told the governors, you handle it. That's been the response from COVID-19 right through to what we're dealing right now. And if things don't go good, he blames the governors without doing anything to try to curb. Here's an idea. Okay, we can let's forget about COVID-19. Focus on what's happening now with the riots. I don't want to say riots. I think that's the wrong word. I think there's been some civil unrest amongst otherwise law-abiding citizens that are protesting the death of this man, which was unacceptable. Okay, they have every right to be pissed off, but there's that 10% that are going in there, and they're not Antifa. I've heard that argument. These are people that live in these neighborhoods. They're the people that will take advantage, go in there and steal a TV set, steal jewelry because they want to steal something. They don't care about this guy's death. They're out to steal something. It's as simple as that. The governor in Minnesota trying to claim that 80% of the people were from out of town, it's a bunch of bull crap. They're local residents that are in there looting. But 90% of the people are doing the right thing. They're protesting loudly. They're carrying signs, and I don't blame them because you know what's going to happen here? And I'm going to wrap this up in a minute because I don't want to get too much on this. I want to get right to the hurricane stuff. But here's what's going to happen. We've seen this time and time again with the Trayvon Martin case. We've seen it with the guy selling the cigarettes that got taken in the ground and choked to death. We saw it with the Rodney King beating. What'll happen is time will go by, people will start to forget about it, right? We'll get back to dealing with COVID-19 or major hurricanes hitting or whatever the big story is of the day. It'll go to a jury trial, and they'll acquit him. A year from now, that guy will walk. That cop will be walking in a year from now. So this is why people protest, and they're sick and tired of it, and I'm sick and tired of it. I'm tired of watching it most of my life of criminals going free because of bad juries or people that like my wife says. She says it's the police unions. They protect their people. They rig the juries or they put people in the juries that they know are going to acquit their officer and they get let go. It happens every single time. Look at the Trayvon Martin case. That jackass that killed that kid, he's still out on the street causing trouble, man. We never learn. And the president has been sitting there not saying anything about this other than stoking more fear. Like, let's send the dogs out. That makes a lot of sense. Considering the history of African Americans in this country, that's the stupidest thing you could say, is send the dogs after these people. Look, I understand arresting the troublemakers. I get it. But there's too many police acting stupidly, even in the riots, pushing an old man to the ground with his cane. Like a 90-year-old man, they pushed him to the ground. Come on, man. And then smacking people in the back of the head, shoving people to the ground, punching people in the face. The police are being exposed, and the people are out protesting, knowing that the police are going to react. And then it's on film, and then people could say, see, this is what the police are. So it's burden on the police right now to do the right thing, the governors, the mayors, to make sure this ends peacefully. But I think they should make an announcement that the protests have to stop. We've had a week of this. You got your message across. Everybody's had a chance to speak. Let's let the system play out. But like I said, a year from now, it might be a whole different ballgame. But for now, it's not helping matters at this point. It's been 6 days. Let's just let the system play out and see what happens. But the president needs to do a State of the Union or some kind of a speech to just lost my mouse. This happens every time. I have this wireless mouse and the ball falls out of it every night. I have to chase it across the room. But anyway, the president should come out and just hold a speech for the country and try to calm things down. He's been pretty much absent during COVID-19. He's been trying to tell the CDC what to do, and the CDC is stifled, man. We've been told a lot of different stories because the president is interfering in science. And I want to tell you tonight that the National Hurricane Center, when these hurricanes start brewing out there, and it matters, and when we have a major hurricane heading toward the United States, the National Hurricane Center is not going to be told by the president what to say. That I'm confident about. The National Hurricane Center will tell you straight what's coming. If there's a Category 5 hurricane heading to New York or Miami or New Orleans or any of the big cities, they're not going to sugarcoat it. They're going to tell you what's happening, and you're going to have probably 2 to 3 days notice, and it's going to be accurate information. The president can't pick up a phone and go, hey, listen, can you tell them it's not going to be that bad or that they don't have to evacuate? Because we don't want to have another shutdown. We don't want to have another city shut down. We can't afford that. No, they will tell you to get out, and you better get out. But that begs the next question. Is COVID-19 going to cause problems with evacuations and sheltering? You're going to have to wear a mask in the shelter. That's a given. In fact, anybody, even right now, that goes into a building without a mask on, to me, you're not playing with a full deck. Unless you have to eat, and if I was going to go eat somewhere, I would eat outside. I wouldn't be eating inside of any buildings right now. I go into a building, I'm masked up. I do not go into any buildings outside of my own house where there's crowds of people. If I know there's 3 or 4 people I don't know, I'm masking up. I'm not going in that building. And so if you have to evacuate this hurricane season, bring PPEs with you. Bring masks. Bring gloves. They're going to have people separating, keeping distance, social distancing. They're going to probably have separate rooms. I've heard they're going to use schools and they're going to use different classrooms to separate people, which is a good idea. They're also going to have reserved hotel rooms for people to evacuate, so they are each in separate rooms, which is also a great idea. The only problem with that is, from my experiences with hurricanes over the years, you get there, the hotels are booked. The hotels, people evacuate. They make reservations way in advance, and they try to book up those hotels. From what I heard, they're going to book them way in advance of they may even have them booked right now, hotel rooms for people to stay in. But I don't know how they can book all those hotel rooms because you don't know where the hurricanes are going to hit unless you're listening here tonight. Are they going to hit Miami? They're going to hit New Orleans? They're going to hit Galveston, Brownsville? Is it going to hit the Carolinas? I mean, are they going to reserve hotel rooms in all these places? I don't really know how that's going to work. But I would make plans, if you live in a major metro area, I would be making plans with friends and relatives that you know that you've already been around, that you feel comfortable you don't need a mask, and try to stay at their house for a few days. Because here's what worries me. It's not just the evacuation before a hurricane. It's evacuating after a major hurricane. It's where are you going to go if your house is destroyed? And I witnessed this firsthand in up around Panama City when I was in Hurricane Michael. I saw what from before the hurricane got there, people going about their normal business. A lot of people weren't taking that hurricane serious, and then Michael hit, and it brought that area to its knees. All infrastructure was knocked out. You couldn't go buy anything you couldn't get fuel, you couldn't get supplies, even to this day, many of those areas are still not operational up in the panhandle. I don't know if it's a big metropolitan area that gets hit this year, I don't know how they're going to take, let's say it's 500,000 people are displaced. where are they going to go? Without this thinking about the safety of COVID-19. And usually, and we know this from recent years, when these major hurricanes hit, they tend to hit later in the season, September, October, right? So that's going to be when the virus is rearing its ugly head again, and we're going to have if we have a major hurricane strike a major metropolitan area, we're going to have 500,000 people that are going to have somewhere to go, and they're not going to have anywhere to go. It's going to be a tragic situation. So it's not the evacuation before the hurricane that worries me. It's what's going to happen after the hurricane hits and the carnage that's going to be left behind that is going to be the problem as far as where are people going to go. So try to make your plans now for when you need to get out. Relatives in other states, make some phone calls. Tell them, if we have a hurricane this year, can we stay at your place for a week or 10 days if need be? Try to take the burden off the government to provide shelter for you, because this is going to be an ugly hurricane season. I'm not saying every hurricane is going to hit land, by the way, and I'll get to my reasoning on that, but all it takes is one major hurricane or one significant hurricane flooding an entire city, and there's your disaster. We've seen it in Texas. You don't need a major hurricane. You could have a tropical storm cause biblical flooding. So make your plans now for getting out of your area. Especially if you're in a flood zone, know where you're going to go and be able to live there for 2, 3, 4 weeks possibly in the aftermath of a hurricane. Another thing, we have a tax-free holiday right now in Florida. If you need supplies right now, generator, bottles to contain water, batteries and flashlights and everything you need. You know what I love? I love these head flashlights, the strap on your head. This is the best investment you can make, because I use this like crazy in Hurricane Michael. I was staying at a hotel up there and was out. If you can see the video at Hurricane City, there's a complete archive, hour-and-a-half video of Bill Phillips covering me in the hurricane. I was in the eye of Hurricane Michael out there, and it brought the whole area to its knees. But this flashlight, very powerful light, right? You strap it to your head. Obviously there was no power in the hotel, so I was able to roam the hallways at night. I took it with me on the road. This was the best investment I ever made. So head flashlights are a must for hurricanes. Let's see. Let's see. I'm just looking through my notes here to make sure I'm not forgetting anything before I get into the. Oh, and I want to talk about stop me. Well, I might be repeating myself, but let me just say this again. If we have 3 major hurricanes hit the United States, God forbid if that happens, if we have 3 hurricanes hit the United States this year, the death toll will be a fraction of what we've seen with COVID-19. However, we've had 1.8 million people infected by this virus. All it takes is one major hurricane to hit a major metropolitan area, and you can have more than 1.8 million people impacted. Because some of you may have felt the trauma of this COVID-19 pandemic, but you might not know anybody that died or got sick. And so therefore, in your mind, it's not a big deal. But if you get a major hurricane in your town and you have a population of 2 million, 3 million people, you're going to be one of those people that's impacted. So think about that. All this time, 3 months of dealing with the COVID-19, 1.8 million people, all it takes is one hurricane to impact 1.8 million people. And with the COVID running around, it's going to be worse as the hurricane season progresses. So keep that in mind. Oh my God. Anyway, let me just. Oh, yeah, that's better. So anyway, what I was saying is, one hurricane could affect just as many people as the entire COVID-19 has impacted. Now, that's people that have been affected by the disease, that have been sick by it. Now, the whole population of the United States, all 328 million of us have been impacted by COVID-19 because many people are losing their jobs. There's people out of work. I've been busy with my business since COVID-19. Believe it or not, because I'm out in the open, I'm a contractor, and I'm not around other people, so it's worked out well for me. But even with my situation, I've been stressed out over this beyond belief. So people that have been impacted by COVID-19, they've got to be, especially if they have a relative that's been sick or died, God forbid, they've got to be like, this is the worst disaster for them, especially people that have had multiple people from the same family die from this disease. We hope that doesn't happen this hurricane season, but you never know what's going to happen this hurricane season. That's why I'm saying be prepared. And oh, God, this is ridiculous. Oh, my God. Well, President says this stuff works, so yeah. Yeah, let me just, it can't hurt, right? All right. Anyway, hopefully that'll do it that was a joke, folks. Please don't do anything that stupid. Okay. No Clorox, no hydroxychloroquine. And by the way, when they come up with a vaccine for this, which, by the way, I think it's going to be till next year, that's another reason why you got to be prepared to go through this whole hurricane season. You're not going to get any help with the COVID-19. You're going to have to deal with hurricane season with COVID-19, whether you like it or not. Now, if you live in Kansas, you're not going to have to deal with hurricane season, but you know what I mean. If you're watching from the coast or in the Caribbean, they've been dealing with COVID-19. The Bahamas has had a whole bunch of people die. Even Jamaica, Cuba, every country in the Caribbean has been affected by COVID-19. So this isn't just a United States problem, but everybody's going to have to deal with this. So be prepared to go through the whole hurricane season dealing with COVID-19. I'm just saying, have a plan and be ready to deal with it. Wear a mask, cover yourself from people like me that are coughing all the time, and make sure you're safe during the hurricane season. Speaking of the Bahamas, Hurricane Dorian. Did you know that most of Marsh Harbor is still ruined in Great Abaco? People have trouble getting fuel still. The COVID-19, people can't even rebuild right now because of COVID-19. They can't get the supplies. There's the building products that are needed to get into the Bahamas are not getting into the Bahamas because of COVID-19. Shipping has pretty much been halted tremendously. So the Bahamas are in trouble, and they don't need another hurricane this season, believe me. But they are still reeling from this. 60-plus people died, 300 missing in the Northwest Bahamas, Grand Bahama, Great Abaco Island. That was my number 6 pick last year, by the way. I'll show you that in a minute, too. It was in my top 5 2 years prior, and I have a rule with my top 5. If you're not hit, the next year you're at higher risk. Next year you're at higher risk. At some point, if you're in my top 5, over the next few years, you're going to get your ass kicked. It's as simple as that. And that happened at Great Abaco Island. They're still reeling. It's still a disaster in the Bahamas. That could be coming to the United States. Some areas are better equipped to deal with these mega disasters than other cities are, and some states are better equipped than other states. But especially if you're in small towns or you're in areas that are kind of rural, you're on your own, man. It's going to be a rough haul. It's going to be a rough haul, so be ready. Be ready. Let's see. We've had a lot of rain in South Florida. I'm just getting through my notes here before I get to the graphics. We've had a very wet May. Now, Jim Lashine, not sure how to pronounce his name, from the National Weather Service in Miami. I think he's retired now. But he had this theory about dry Mays equals hurricane hits for South Florida. Because the theory is that the ridge of high pressure builds out over the open Atlantic, steering all of the hurricanes from Africa right up the pike, Hurricane Alley, right into South Florida. We've seen numerous years where that hasn't happened. We've had very rainy Mays, and we've gotten our ass kicked. So forget that idea. And we've had a rainy May here in South Florida. We've had record number of rainfall in South Florida from cold fronts and tropical systems coming up from the south. We've been bombarded. So if we get hit by a hurricane this year, can we finally put that to rest? I mean, that theory is just, it doesn't hold any water to me, no pun intended. It's a bad predictive scheme. I don't like it, and I don't think it holds any water. Let's see. Oh, I'm going to show you that too. I'll show you that. I got to remind myself to, you know what? I might start out by, no, I don't have that queued up. Hurricane Lorenzo last year affected the Azores, and I think about 110 mile an hour, and it passed through the northwest of the Azores, and a ship got sunk out there. It was called the, oh gosh, I didn't write the name of the ship down. Anyway, there was like 30 people on board or something, and the ship went down northwest of the Azores, and the hurricane hunters were out there. The high-altitude aircraft, the NOAA 42, the crew was able to, I believe it was the regular hurricane hunters and the high-altitude aircraft that were out there, and they were able to spot the ship because they were flying around. They were running out of fuel, and they were able to spot that ship, at least the debris from that ship, and send for help. And 5 people got rescued, were found alive, and the rest did not make it. But believe it or not, on that plane, it was all women that were flying that were engineers and pilots and NOAA researchers that were on that plane that were able to spot that vessel and save all those lives on there. As late as it was, they did not, because they're in the middle of a hurricane, for God's sake. You can't really, it's hard to spot ships on this sea during a hurricane, but they were able to spot the ship and save some lives. So I'm going to show you some of the graphics from that. I got to start with that because I might forget to do it. I'm very forgetful. You have to excuse me on these shows. I got so many things to talk about, so many things on my mind that sometimes I just ramble and I forget to go back to something, and it's like, So I'll do my best to get back to that. See if there's any. Oh, SpaceX. That was one good thing that's happened recently. SpaceX launched, no problems. And come on, man, you got to admit, when you were watching that, if you were watching that SpaceX liftoff, you had to be thinking, oh my God, bad things happen in threes. We've been to COVID-19. We have the George Floyd situation, and we have the SpaceX launch, and this thing's going to blow up on the when it takes off. It's going to blow up, right? It's going to be like the space shuttle. I mean, I was thinking that. I was thinking, oh man, I just have a bad, because there was some storms off the coast when that ship took off. There was some storms out west. There were some storms out over the water, and I thought, oh man, one lightning strike or one problem, and kaboom, right? And luckily, they took off. Everything was fine. They docked with the space station. So congratulations for SpaceX on a job well done. The return rocket came back and landed on the platform out over the open water, so they could use that again. However, I do question the live video stream that went down during that. So we didn't get to see the rocket land back down on the platform. So I don't, you don't know what's real and what isn't. I mean, a little bit shady stuff going on there, but we'll let that go. I'm sure people on the coast probably had to have seen it at least. I don't know. Let's see. All right, so we talked about everything, the PPE, the virus, the civil unrest that's going on right now. People are agitated. We have a hurricane season starting today. We have a new tropical depression out there. I don't think it's going to amount to much, but some models are taking it north. We'll start with that, and then I'm going to get into my predictions, and I want to alert you when I'm showing you this. Please pay attention. And if you don't want to pay attention, some people, I posted the video on this, on my predictions, explains in detail how I arrive at my conclusions, okay? And there are people that are going to still come on the internet and go, this is like flipping a coin. This is throwing darts at a map. No, it isn't. And I'm going to show you some of the research that I do to come up with these conclusions and how accurate they've been over at least the past several years. I'm even going to show you maps to verify before the season started where I said something was going to go and what ended up actually happening. So let's get to the Azores. Let me cue it up first. I want to show you the pictures of the crew that saved the lives of those people out there. And we'll start with that, and then I'm going to go to the TD number 3 with the tracking, and then I'm going to get to my predictions. So let me get everything queued up here real quick, and then I'm going to switch sources, and you're going to get to see it on the screen. Again, those of you joining me right now, Jim Williams, Hurricane Season Kickoff Show. It's 8:47 p.m. Eastern Time, and I haven't even gotten to the predictions, so let's get right to it. First of all, let's okay, that was the Azores. By the way, for those of you that want to know how I'm getting this information, was the National Hurricane Center put out a statement about it, a PDF, a story. They wrote a blog on it, and I linked to it in the database. You go to Hurricane City, the front page, which is the database, and you go to the Azores, click on the Azores and scroll down to the bottom, and then you'll see the sinking of ship to the northwest down at the bottom of the page for the Azores, and this is it. So let me go ahead and screen capture this for you. Okay, so okay, here we go. So here is the page from the National Hurricane Center, Inside the Eye. It's a blog about the ship that went down. I'm not going to read the entire thing, but there is the ship that sank, and the crew, most of them didn't make it, unfortunately, but they did. Here's the aircraft that were involved in that recon mission that found the ship, or at least debris from the ship, and there's the flight path that they took. They were zigzagging all over the place trying to find it. They were running low on fuel, and they did find some debris. And there's a picture of the 5 guys in the life raft that survived that ship sinking from Hurricane Lorenzo. 110-mile-an-hour wind sunk that ship, and there's the surviving crew that was rescued. And here is a picture of the crew. All women. Check that out. So they did an excellent job. I know there were several aircraft involved with this process of saving the lives out there near the Azores, and so I'm sure there were some men involved. It wasn't all women, but these were some of the women that were involved in the search and rescue for those guys and men and women that were saved from that ship that sank out there. Anyway, I just thought if you want to see this. Of course, it's at the National Hurricane Center. I think it's on their front page, but you can also find it in the database. Go to the front page of Hurricane City and click on the Azores and scroll to the bottom, and it talks about Lorenzo. There's some data on Lorenzo, and then the story about this ship that sank. Okay, so now if you're wondering why I have my back turned to you, I have all my data and all my prediction stuff on this computer, and I'm broadcasting from that computer, so I do everything on this computer, so it's not like I'm turning my back on you. I'm just queuing things up, and then when I get them queued up, I show them to you. So here is the, let's get to the front page of Hurricane City, and I'm going to show you the tracking of TD number 3. So here we go. Okay, here is the front page, or what was the front page of Hurricane City. And let me explain before I zoom in on this map. This was the front page of Hurricane City. I got a lot of flack over this because what I do is I show the best performing models on each particular system, and I was taking my calculations based on model data and showing people a red dot of where the featured city that I thought was going to be the most impacted, sometimes days in advance, of where the hurricane was going to go. And I would pretty much pinpoint where the hurricane would end up eventually hitting. And I got a lot of flack over this, and a lot of, there's some people in this industry, I could kick them in the nuts, much less have a conversation with them. there's a lot of snobbiness in this industry, and I'm just pushing the science. And I did a pretty good job for many years pinpointing where these things were going to go days in advance, and I just decided to get away from it and focus on the database. So the database is now the front page, and this is the secondary. You can pull the drop-down menu, see at the top of the page, you click on products, and then you click on hurricane tracking, and it takes you to this page. So this GIS map has all the layers that have been built into it, the best performing models. I even have it set to where the more you zoom in on the map, it tells you population totals from the affected areas, all the towns and the roads get all zoomed in on. It's a really cool map. Of course, you click on the red dots, it takes you right to the database or the cities that are in the database. This is still a work in progress, but this map is really great to use. And below it, notice all the yellow links down there. Those are, you can get the latest on TD number 3, the latest best track data. You can get zoomed in satellite picture. You can get the latest Hurricane Hunter aircrafts, which, by the way, the Hurricane Hunters are going out there in the morning to invest TD number 3. So we'll have more information on that, which you can click on that recon link right here at the bottom, and then it'll open up the recon program. They're not out there now, so there's no point in showing it to you. But here, let's zoom in on this. It also puts up marine warnings. You notice the orange boxes off the state of Florida. It's the current marine warnings and tornado warnings and rainfall warnings. All these are embedded in the map, so it's a really cool map to use. But you can zoom right in on this. So here we go, and this is going out to Saturday out here. Winds up to 50 knots just north of the Yucatan Peninsula. But the red models, and notice the ranking of the models. You've got red, best performing, purple, next best performing, orange, third best performing, yellow, fourth best performing, green, fifth best performing. What we've done is, and Chris and I have talked ad nauseum about this, and I apologize for the people that are listening and watching tonight that I've already given this tutorial, but a lot of people might be new to the show and they don't understand what the models represent. And what we do, Chris and I have talked constantly about this. Should we go based on 24 hours of model data? Should we go based on 36, 48 hours? Do we go 5 days out? The problem is the longer you go out in time, and what you like to do is find out where a model thinks something's going to go out in 5 days from now and go based on how it's performed the past 5 days. The problem with that is if you choose that method, then you have to wait 5 days for the model to show up on the map, right? Most hurricanes are already inland in 4 or 5 days. So you don't want to use 5 days. So this is based on 24 hours of data. So these are the best, we calculate hundreds of models. And the best five best performing models are displayed on the map over the past 24 hours. This is not the best performing models over the course of the last 2 days, 3 days, 4. This is only the last 24 hours. So a lot of times you're going to look at this map and you're going to get, you're going to ask me, well, Jim, the GFS was the best yesterday. Why is the Euro the best today? Because that was 24 hours ago. Now the European is the best the past 24 hours. And so anyway, you can click on these. Like if you click on the best performer, which is the red model here, and that a window will pop up and it says AVNO, which is the GFS model. And it shows that it's predicting in 24 hours it's going to be at 32 knots. And it takes it down into Central America, loop-to-loops down here, which is what a lot of the models do. They want to loop it down into the Bay of Campeche, back onto land, and then they slowly take it as a very broad center of circulation north of the Yucatan Peninsula. And from there, most of the models indicate that it's probably going to impact Texas in some way or western Louisiana. So again, that's 5 days out, 6, 7 days. It's hard to get a grip on these that far out. But it looks like it's going to be a western Gulf of Mexico kind of a system. So I'll get to my predictions in a minute. Texas, I have at high risk this year, so we'll get to the tracks on that in just a minute. But anyway, this can be found, again, by using the drop-down menus and choosing hurricane tracking. And it's got the recon in it. You can get the data from the National Hurricane Center. By the way, this is all extracted from the National Hurricane Center database. It's not – we don't make this stuff up. It's taken from the all the data from the National Hurricane Center, the cones of error, the forecast points, The models are taken from their database as well, and it's shown graphically on our GIS map. So that's the way that works. All right, so let's get to the graphics of what I have saved for our show tonight. And here we go. Now, I want to mention that this was 2016 map, by the way. This is back from my predictions before the season started on May 15th, 2016. The red track is what I predicted the white tracks are what I predicted would happen before the season started. And the red track is the one major system that ended up impacting the Caribbean and the United States. That was Hurricane Matthew, which I was in Hurricane Matthew, by the way. Didn't get in the eye because the eye stayed just offshore of Florida. But I was in the eye wall of Hurricane Matthew, had some wind gusts over 100 miles an hour. It was really dramatic. I was up in New Smyrna Beach, just north of New Smyrna Beach for that. Filming live for my audience when I do these shows. But look at the white track that I had predicted. Let's see, I predicted this track down here and had something coming up, kind of like an Irma type track, except coming over Jamaica and then straddling the East Coast and then heading up toward the Canadian Maritimes. So you see what, sorry about that. You see what ended up happening. The red track was it became a Category 5 hurricane down there in the Caribbean. Crossed over the, what's the name of that peninsula in Haiti? The Barahona, not Barahona. Oh gosh, it's slipping my mind. But anyway, the peninsula in Haiti was hit by Category 3, Category 4 conditions. Then it hit Barracuda, Cuba, as a major hurricane, and Mike Dice, the storm chaser, he was down there filming that. That was pretty dramatic stuff. And then it went over the Bahamas, did a number on Andros Island, Nassau, and then it straddled the coast of Florida and went up and impacted South Carolina, North Carolina with very heavy rain. But you see the point here showing you this graphic. My prediction of a track from south to north straddling the East Coast pretty much panned out in 2016. Okay, now we go, I skipped it. All right, so let me zoom in on these, by the way. Okay, here is 2017's predictions, and you can see the white tracks are what I released on May 15th, and the red is results of what actually happened during the hurricane season. Here we go. We started with Harvey and Nate late in the season, and there was Hurricane Irma. That was the big story in 2017. All three of those tracks, pretty similar to what ended up happening. And you notice the numbers in the ranking of which I had the cities predicted are right underneath those tracks. So you can't get any better than this, folks. I mean, I don't see anybody on the internet that's even coming close to pinpointing locations like this, folks. They're drawing large circles. They're picking out large areas that could be impacted. I'm picking points on a map and pretty much nailing where these tracks are going to go. It's not perfect, but it's pretty damn good. So those three tracks absolutely matched up. Okay, so here is the okay, why am I not getting this? Come on. Why is this not working? Okay, I'm losing my, there we go. That's because I zoomed in on it, that's why. Okay, here is again 2017. This is with the wind swaths. Now, my predictions are based on wind swaths. And the reason I'm showing you these past years is so that you have an understanding when I show you this year's what I'm actually predicting to happen. The hurricane or tropical storm, it goes for either one of them, does not have to, the eye does not have to pass over the city to be counted. The wind field has to impact. Tropical storm force winds have to impact these cities to be counted as a strike. So here are the numbers of my order of predictions for 2017 underneath the wind swaths. And you can see a pattern. Number 9, 8, 14, 16, 13, 15, 14, all underneath Hurricane Irma. And then we had Hurricane Nate And that was my number 2 for the northern Gulf Coast. And then over here in Texas, we had Harvey, which came in as a Category 4 hurricane and dumped heavy rain over the upper Texas coast. And we all know the story. That was an utter disaster for Texas that year. So all 3 of these areas I had to be impacted in 2017. So here we are, 2018's predictions. Again, let's zoom in on this. So the 2018 thinking was, and I released these on May 15th again, and the thinking was early in the year, we're going to have a system in the eastern Gulf of Mexico heading toward the Florida Panhandle. Sure enough, we had Alberto. It followed almost the exact track of my white track there. The red track was Alberto, and my track was the white track. And then late in the season, of course, Hurricane Michael hit the Panhandle. If you reverse that white track and kind of flip it on its side, there you go, Eastern Gulf. Point is, my thinking was Eastern Gulf for 2018. Then we had Florence. I predicted Wilmington, North Carolina. That was my number 2 pick in 2018, and you can see the number 2 was hit dead on. The eye passed right over Wilmington, North Carolina. And look at the track. My white track was, down near Puerto Rico, down near the Leeward Islands, and then just north of Puerto Rico, north of the Bahamas, rather, and then heading right up into the Carolinas. And Florence kind of did the same. Right at the end of the track, Florence came into the United States and then ended up going out. But my track showed it hitting and then going out without dipping to the left. So it's pretty close. I mean, those tracks pretty much lined up with the Florence versus the mid-season track that I have there in white. So that leads me to, this was 2018's chart. Now, every year I make a chart and break it down based on all my criteria on why I think a certain area is going to get hit. So notice the red box down at the bottom of your screen. That is Wilmington, North Carolina, number 2. Notice 2 of those areas, 2 of those, let's see, let me annotate this. So you have this one right here, which is, let me minimize this. Okay, clear. Let me just stop the annotate here. Okay. Okay, that's better. I have to shrink it a little bit in order to annotate it to show you what I'm talking about. Okay, so here is the number 2 pick down at the bottom. Notice this box right here and this box right here. This is why Wilmington was number 2 on my pick for 2018, and that is because the 2 criteria, whoever has the most yellow boxes wins. That's the way my system works. In a nutshell, whoever has the most yellow on the chart wins. And they're the ones that have to be careful the hurricane season coming up. So in 2018, number 2, Wilmington was picked because it reached 2 out of the 7 criteria that year, one of which was ENSO analog years. What I did is go back in history and find out all of the years that match the current temperatures of ENSO, and take those years. You go to the ENSO page, there's a whole chart full of all the years and what the temperatures were like in the Eastern Pacific leading up to the hurricane season. And so what I did is go back and take every one of those years that I chose that's similar to what the current pattern was going into the 2018 hurricane season, and go back in history over 150 years and match that up with every time Wilmington was hit during those ENSO analog years that I chose. And 7 of those ENSO analog years, Wilmington was hit. So there you go. That's why Wilmington was chosen number 2. The other criteria was average number of named storms when Wilmington gets hit is 12.15 named storms, and we were expecting right around 13, 14 named storms in 2018. So that's why Wilmington was won that category as well. It was one of the highest areas that had a high number of named storms and generally gets hit by named storms when there's an active hurricane season. So basically, the red box indicates down there why Wilmington was number 2, and you could extrapolate that to every other city in my top 20. Naturally, number 20 would be only probably 1 yellow box or no yellow boxes. That's the way. Whoever has the most boxes gets higher up on the list. That's the way, in a nutshell, that's the way my predictions work. Okay, so let's go ahead and go to the next image. And why isn't that working? Okay. All right. So here was 2018. And I promise you folks, I'm going to get to this year in just a minute. Here's another snapshot of 2018. These are all the systems that hit land in 2018 that I chose, underneath the cities that I chose. My number 1 was Sable Island, Nova Scotia. Tropical Storm Chris, passed right over it. My number 2, Wilmington, North Carolina. Hurricane Florence, I passed right over Wilmington. Number 3, Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. The center of Tropical Storm Florence at that time, because remember, it was turning around, ready to head out to sea, passed right over Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. It was actually dipping to the south a little bit, and it stalled over Myrtle Beach before it went back out to sea. Cape Hatteras, North Carolina, as Hurricane Florence was coming in and as it was leaving, it was impacting Cape Hatteras. And finally, my number 5, Isle of Pines, Cuba, that little island down there on the west tip of Cuba, was impacted by subtropical storm Alberto early in the season. That's the one that went up the eastern Gulf of Mexico. So all 5 of my top 5 were impacted in 2018. And that's the storms that did hit. So here we go. Here are my picks for the 2019 Atlantic hurricane season. And again, for those that are just joining, if you're donating to Hurricane City, if you donate to my cause, you got this 2 years ago. I wish I could give you 2 years in advance, to be honest with you. No, but I gave it to you 2 weeks ago. Here's my picks. Well, actually, on the 20th, I released it. And I told you, these are my picks. This is the video, and these are my graphics. The people that donated got this. The reason I'm releasing it publicly this year is because of the COVID-19 and all the unrest right now in the country. I felt people are uneasy about the upcoming hurricane season. They're nervous about it. They're hearing about how busy it's going to be. And so here you go. I'm releasing it this year. It's no slight to my donators. Next year, it probably will only go to the donation list unless we're still in the middle of the throes of COVID-19, which is a possibility. But next year, it should go only to the donation list. If you'd like to donate to Hurricane City, what I'm doing here, there's a donation link on the Facebook page that you're probably watching this on, or the Periscope. Well, actually, it's not on Periscope, but you got to go to hurricanecity.com. Use the drop-down menus. You can donate, and then you will get a heads up on all this stuff in your email box. And by the way, during the hurricane season, if there's a significant threat, not talking about Invest, I don't do Invest, but if there's a significant threat in the Atlantic Basin, I will be emailing my list of donators my thoughts on what's going to happen with a system approaching the United States or the Caribbean. So please donate. I'd like to get at least $20 annually. It's a decent, it's pennies on the day. So if you can afford $20 annually, that gets you on my donation list, and I really appreciate it. So anyway, here are my predictions. Number 1 is, in case you haven't already read them, number 1 is Bermuda. I'm sorry, this was last year's. I'm ahead of myself here. This was last year's predictions, not this year's. Hold on. This was last year's. Hurricane Umberto, Bermuda, that was my number 1 pick. My number 2, Nassau, Bahamas now. That's been eliminated because it turned out that Dorian did not brush Nassau, Bahamas. The Hurricane Center did not mention anything about Nassau in their final report on Hurricane Dorian. So that's been eliminated from the tropical storm swath wind field for my predictions. I know the Hurricane Center maps show that the wind field did touch Nassau, but I have seen no indication that they had any kind of sustained hurricane force, tropical storm force winds in Nassau, so I decided to take that off. So last year I got 4 out of 5. My number 3 was Fernandina Beach, Florida, brushed by Hurricane Dorian. Wilmington, North Carolina, brushed by Hurricane Dorian. Grand Isle, Louisiana, Tropical Storm Barry early in the hurricane season. Number 6, Great Abaco Island, Bahamas, completely devastated by Hurricane Dorian. That was number 6. And they were hit by, brushed by Umberto as well, by the way. as a tropical storm. Cape Sable, Nova Scotia, which is like the southwest portion of of Nova Scotia, was impacted by Dorian as it was an extratropical system. By the way, extratropical systems count. They do count on my predictions. So even if the Hurricane Center drops advisories, the Canadian Hurricane Center continues the advisories, and it does count. Halifax, Nova Scotia, extratropical Dorian, post-tropical, whatever you want to call it. Panama City, Florida, tropical storm Nestor brushed, and Sydney, Nova Scotia, which is northern Nova Scotia, extratropical Hurricane Dorian brush. So there you go. This was probably the most I've gotten right in all the years that I've been doing my predictions. My top 5 impacted, and then the next 5 after that impacted. So it was a really good year last year for my predictions. And this is why I keep doing this every year. I mean, as much as I kind of want to give it up because I'm not getting the support I think it deserves, I can't stop myself, because it's like you're winning a race every year and you're going to pull out of the race because you can't get any sponsors. I mean, that's where it's at right now. You're kind of like, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. So I can't stop doing this because it's been so successful. All right, let's get on to 2019. We've been almost an hour into this. I bored you enough. Here, ladies and gentlemen, are the 2019 predictions for the upcoming hurricane season. Here is a map of my predictions for the 2019 Atlantic hurricane season with tracks superimposed on top of the numbers, not in any particular order of, well, they are. Number 1 is my most likely area to be impacted. 1 through 5 is on the map and goes down to my pick number 20. I do the tracks just for fun, although they've been really accurate the past several years. This year, I'm kind of thinking we could see a track through the Caribbean Sea and into Texas, kind of like a Gilbert Allen kind of a track, maybe, perhaps. And then later in the season, we could see maybe an opal kind of a situation, or one of these systems that pops in the Gulf late in the year in October and then cuts across the southeast, goes up the eastern seaboard, wreaks havoc all up and down. Notice the numbers packed together up there on the mid-Atlantic coast. And I think Ocean City is like number 5 or so. I got to look that up. I think Ocean City, no, it's number 6. But it's the 2000. These are the 2019 predictions. And by the way, this map can be found on the tracking page that I showed you earlier. Go down to Jim's City Predictions, and the GIS map will open, and you can zoom in on all these numbers, and you click on each number, and it'll give you an explanation as to how I arrived at each location. So that is available using the tracking page at Hurricane City. All right, here is my concept of how I arrived at my top 5. And this is this year's graph. I do one of these every single year. Notice the winner is the yellow highlighted boxes up there. Cancun, Mexico has the most, it wins the most categories. I have 8 criteria up there, and Cancun, Mexico won 5 out of the 8. So they win. The most yellow boxes wins, and that is Cancun, Mexico. So that is my number 1 pick. And probably the most important predictor in picking Cancun, Mexico this year is the fact that, well, not only are they 5 years overdue for a named storm, and believe me, people that poo-poo due versus overdue really don't understand climatology, because if you very rarely are any cities in my database overdue or way overdue for a named storm or a hurricane. Very rarely, well, especially for a named storm. Hurricanes, sometimes they can go overdue, but the heavyweight is due or overdue for a named storm, and it's 5 years overdue in Cancun. In fact, the whole Western Caribbean is way overdue, and I have a bad feeling about the Western Caribbean this year. And you can go back and play this video at the end of the hurricane season, and you're going to say, damn it, Jim picked it again. I'm telling you, if you live in the Western Caribbean, you better be ready this year. In fact, the Cayman Islands are right there, and they're number 2 this year. on my list. So number 1 and number 2 in the Caribbean. Remember in 2005 when I had Mississippi and New Orleans and all those areas packed together and Katrina hit? I'm telling you, if you're in the Western Caribbean, that's a hot spot. And I'm going to show you something else in a minute that's going to really astound you. There has only been one other year in all the years that I've been doing this, 18 years and counting now, where I only had one of my top 5 in the United States, and all the rest were down in the Caribbean. And that year, the Caribbean absolutely got slammed. I'll show you that graphic in a minute. But the other reason why Cancun is number 1 this year is below average pressures of the North Atlantic Oscillation. Now, I don't want to get into all the details about the NAO. But the North Atlantic Oscillation, I added that as one of my criteria back in 2014 and 15 because those were my 2 worst years in all of the years that I've been making predictions. 2014 and 15 were a bust, and I decided I needed to make a change. So I stopped using Phil Klotzbach's number of named storms because he was leading me way into bad areas, and I decided, let me choose how many named storms I think there's going to be. And my predictions improved dramatically. And then by adding the North Atlantic Oscillation prediction on top of it, my predictions have been stellar ever since I did that. So what I do is I go back and I look at the current NAO over the past several months. It's leaning towards negative. So I go back in history, over 150 years of history, and I look at all the areas that were picked when there's been a negative NAO. Well, actually since 1990. I don't go back 150 years because there's no data for the NAO going back that far. I go back to 1990 and look at all the negative NAOs. And then I think, how many times has Cancun been hit during a negative NAO? And it wins 71% of the time. When there's a negative NAO, Cancun, Mexico gets hit by a named storm. There you go. And there's other criteria that have matched in there as well. I'm not going to get into all the specifics on that, but this is just a general idea of how I arrive at my top 5 and my top 20. It's not just throwing pixie dust in the air or flipping a coin. Okay, so here is what I wanted to show you. 2014 and 15, 2007 was the only year that I picked 4 out of 5 of my top cities to be impacted outside of the United States. 4 out of my top 5 are outside the U.S. in 2007. And this is what ended up happening in 2007. I had a heavy leaning towards Central America, and there we go. Look at Central America right here. We had Hurricane Dean and Felix, both Category 5 hurricanes, roaming through the Caribbean and hitting Central America. So will that happen this year? That's kind of what I'm thinking. Western Caribbean, Yucatan, Texas, Mexico maybe. And now we have this system down there, TD number 3. Some of the models are indicating that could head towards Texas. So even if I don't get this, and by the way, I'm thinking this is going to happen mid to late season. I don't think this is going to be early, but I'm going to show you all, while I have this graphic up, let me show you something. So I want to show you, let me use the thick pen here. This is generally the way hurricane seasons unfold. This is generally the way, and I'm going to get to some of the other people, what they're predicting out there. I've got to talk about all the different companies and what they're saying is going to happen this year, but I'm going to wrap my predictions up before I get to that. But this is the way the season generally plays out in the Atlantic Basin. Early is between over here and over here is generally June, July, August. Okay, in between those red lines, those scribbly red disaster lines I just drew on there, that's generally early in the season. Okay, then we got, here we go, height of the season. Generally in this area right here. General height of the season, generally in this area right in here. That's where you're going to get the majority of the activity at the height of the season. And then when you go out and you look at October and November, you're talking something like this, right out in here. Sometimes you can get a late season, something going like that, but that's generally your late season type scenario right there, in between the two red lines and then something coming from the Gulf. So that's just a rundown. Basically, in other words, in a nutshell, early Texas, Louisiana, Western Caribbean, height of the season, central northern Gulf Coast, Florida, Cuba, the eastern seaboard, late in the season, the eastern Caribbean Sea, systems coming from the south, riding up the eastern seaboard. So that's generally the ebb and flow of the tropics. If you were to put your money on an early season, it would be in the western, for landfalling systems I'm talking about, by the way. I'm not talking about fish storms. If you're talking about landfalling systems, early is Texas. Texas, 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 early. Mid-season, Northern Gulf, Eastern Seaboard, Caribbean. Late season, Eastern Caribbean, possibly Western Caribbean, Eastern Gulf of Mexico, Eastern Seaboard. So those are your time frames for general activity that happened during the Atlantic Basin. And then, of course, we have all the garbage storms like the May systems we've seen. We've already had a couple of systems, one near the Carolinas and another one that was out of the open Atlantic, I believe. And then we almost had one out there near Bermuda. That didn't materialize. Now we have a new one down in the southern Gulf of Mexico. But you see why TD3 is number there. It's there right now because that's the most likely time for a system like this to pop up is early in the season, right where TD number 3 is right now. That's what you're going to expect. Okay. So let's go look at some other predictions. All right, here's Rob Lightbones from Crown Weather. Now, every year he puts out his predictions, and this is from March, by the way. So he was even before I released my predictions. He probably is going to come out with some new ones. Maybe he did it today. I don't know. But I just grabbed these images today. So he still had the March up on his website. But he draws large circles. Not a big fan of that, but he's done a pretty good job on at least indicating where the activity could be. And by the way, Rob does a great job of Crown Weather throughout the hurricane season because he gives mail up. I suggest everybody sign up for his tropical updates. He basically emails everybody with graphics and potential tracks of upcoming what the models are thinking on potential systems like Invest and name storms and whatnot. And he puts a lot of graphics into it, does a great job. But here's his hurricane predictions from March 10th. And you can see that he's giving thinking there's going to be a strong Atlantic ridge out there, steering systems into the East Coast potentially. He's got the same risk that I do, very high risk for an active Caribbean season in terms of tropical storms and hurricane activity, which includes the Western Caribbean, which is what I have at very high risk. And, of course, he's also got the Texas area and the northern Gulf Coast at high risk for a tropical storm or hurricane. So he's thinking like I do, but I narrow it down to points on a map. And I don't know what criteria that he's using to come up with these conclusions, but at least I got to give him credit. He's picking where he thinks the systems could go. And a lot of times, and again, I'm not a big fan of big circles like this. I don't like them. But this is what some of the other companies do, like CSU and AccuWeather and whatnot. They draw these big, huge circles, so it's hard to be wrong when you make a circle that's the size of the entire eastern seaboard. But it's risky to pick a point on a map. I get it. I know why a lot of forecasters don't like doing it because it's hard. It's hard to do, and you could easily have egg on your face. All right, so that's Rob's. Now, here's AccuWeather's forecast. And by the way, I'm predicting 18 to 20 named storms myself. I don't get into how many hurricanes versus tropical storms because my methodology is based on landfalls. Whether it's a tropical storm or a hurricane, I don't get into the ACE. I don't get into which is the accumulated cyclone energy, by the way. I don't get into geographic regions. I don't get into percentage of hurricanes versus tropical storms. I do that in my database, but I don't do that in my predictions. But I just get into the number of named storms because that has a high that's one of the highest predictors in my scheme for picking out what cities are going to be impacted is how many named storms there's going to be. and 18 to 20 is what I'm predicting. And I think it may be more than that. I think we could see a year like 2005. We're already well out of the gates. I mean, it's like the Kentucky Derby, and we have 35 horses, and 3 of them have already left the gates. I don't 35, more like 25. But 3 have already left the gates, and we're on day 1 here. So, I mean, I think we're going to be 20 or more. I just hope we're not too much over 20, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get more landfalls. And there's a whole bunch of hurricane seasons where we had a lot of recurvatures. And in fact, when there's a negative NAO, there tends to be troughiness set up on the East Coast, and that causes more recurvatures out in the open Atlantic. And it looks like when there's a negative NAO right now, and it's going to possibly proceed through the hurricane season, potentially. We'll see where we're at the height of it. But right now, when there's a negative NAO in April and May, it usually means that there's more recurvatures out in the open Atlantic. So even though we could end up with 20 or 25 named storms, doesn't mean that they're all coming into the land masses. I mean, a lot of them could turn out to sea. I expect that this year. And then every now and then, they're going to get trapped under a ridge and get shoved into the Caribbean Sea. And I'm thinking that's going to happen this year. So recurvatures, but every now and then one's going to slip underneath and get into the Gulf of Mexico, Caribbean Gulf of Mexico. Okay, so here's AccuWeather: 14 to 18 named storms, 7 to 9 hurricanes, 2 to 4 major, 2 to 4 U.S. impacts. Again, I don't get into the classification of what I think is going to happen. I do think we're going to see at least a few majors, though, somewhere in the Atlantic Basin this year for sure. Whether they all impact land, or I think a couple, 1 or 2 will impact land. Whether it's the United States or not, that's a whole other issue. It's quite conceivable that we could go the entire hurricane season without one major hurricane impacting the United States. That's a distinct possibility. We could even have a hurricane season, even if it's busy, where we do not have a landfalling hurricane in the United States. It is possible. So, just saying. Okay, so here's Phil Klotzbach. And again, he does not really predict specific landfall points. He talks about percentage of possibility for an entire stretch of coastline, which I'm not a big fan of. He also does the e-transit site, which narrows his picks down county to county, but it's all small percentages like 1%, 2%, 3%. You can't really decipher what he's thinking as far as landfalls. So he gives large percentages for large stretches of coastline. Not a big fan of it, but this is what he's predicting. 16 named storms. This was it from April 2nd. He's predicting 16 named storms. And what I admire about Phil Klotzbach is that he does have the gall to predict a single number of named storms. He doesn't give a range like NOAA does. He's giving a single number. He's predicting 16, so he's risking being off by 4 or 5 named storms at the end of the year. He adjusted in August, which I think is kind of like cheating in a way. It's like you're at the end of the first quarter of an NFL football game and you're changing your bet based on the way the team is playing. I'm not a big fan of that. I make my predictions and I stick with them. I make my predictions in May and I live or die with them. It's the way it is. But he's predicting 16 named storms, 8 hurricanes, 4 major hurricanes. The entire U.S. East Coast, 69%. The average for the last century is 52%, so he's a higher average percentage chance of the East Coast being impacted, which I also have. The U.S. East Coast, including Peninsula of Florida, 45% chance. The average for the last century is 31. So that's also above normal chance for the Florida Peninsula. And then the Gulf Coast from the Florida Panhandle westward of Brownsville, he has a 44% chance, 30% for the last century. So he's 14% above for the western Gulf of Mexico and the central Gulf of Mexico. He's 13% off. 14%. And basically, he's pretty much even odds for all areas of the United States, the East Coast, the Gulf, and Florida. He's basically giving even odds for all those areas based on climatology, a higher than average percentage of being impacted, but giving each area an equal chance of being impacted. So it's not really going out on a limb here. He's just basically giving even odds for anywhere in the United States to be impacted. All right, so let's go to the next one. This is NOAA's forecast, and they're predicting a 60% chance of having 13 to 19 named storms, 30% near normal, and 10% chance below normal. So they're predicting an above normal. The normal, by the way, is 12, which I don't believe. Since 1992, we've been averaging about 15 to 16 named storms a year. So the 12 named storms doesn't wash with me because we're in a new era now where not only are we naming storms in the Northeast Atlantic that really have no rhyme or reason or being named, I can't stand the naming of these systems out in the open Atlantic that are like subtropical. I can't stand it. I hate it. It fudges the numbers. They're naming everything, and they're going back in history and finding there was a lot more storms that were originally out there, but they're still only claiming we're at 12 named storms. I think we're averaging more like 15, 16. So if we end up with 20, it's above average, but not a barn burner year. But if we end up with 25 named storms, yeah, that would be a barn burner hurricane season. So NOAA's predicting we're going to have a 60% chance of above average, which is more than 12. So they're predicting 13 to 19. They give a range. I mean, they could be 5 named storms off and still be right. They're giving themselves a lot of fudge here, room. I mean, they really are. I've never been a fan of NOAA's forecast for predictions before the season starts because it's too wide of a range of possibilities. Mine only spans 3, 18, 19, or 20 named storms is what I'm predicting. And they're predicting 13 to 19, which is a wide range, and I'm not a big fan of it. By the way, they don't talk about where they think they're going to go, which I think is a huge mistake. People are all left, well, everybody has an even chance, which we know that's not true. The math adds up every single year. If you do the stats, you run all the numbers, you do everything, you can find out in certain hurricane seasons, some areas are more vulnerable than others. That is a statistical fact, and NOAA refuses to acknowledge it, and they like to disassociate themselves from predicting where storms are going to go, and I think they're doing a disservice to the general public. I really do. By not predicting, trying to at least figure out where they think storms might be, a higher risk versus other areas. That's the decision they made, whatever. Okay, so here is Weather Bell, and this is Joe Bastardi and his guys over there at Weather Bell up in Pennsylvania. They come out with a hurricane predictive scheme every year. They're predicting 14 to 20 named storms. They're predicting 7 to 11 hurricanes, 3 to 6 majors. Again, a range. 14 to 20. 6 possibilities there. Come on, man. You can't narrow it down any more than that. I mean, 14 to 20, you can't be wrong with that kind of number. Even if there's 21 named storms, they could go, well, we were at 20. And if it's on the low end, if we have 13 named storms, they go, well, we were at 14. We were right. It's like you can never be wrong when you pick that wide of a range of numbers. I'm not a big fan of that at all. And again, I don't get into the ACE. So here's what they're thinking as far as landfalls. They put these maps out at Weather Bell, and these are not pay-per-view, by the way. These are free to the public. Thinking Category 4, Southwest Florida. I'm not exactly sure if this is category they're thinking is going to hit, or if this is just some kind of scale they use. I think it's based on category. So they're thinking a major hurricane potentially for Central Texas coastline, South Florida, Category 3, South Texas, North Texas, Mississippi, Alabama, Florida Panhandle, North Carolina, Category 2, East Coast of Florida, Mississippi, Carolinas again, and then Category 1, Panhandle, Southeast Louisiana, Upper Texas Coast, Lower Texas Coast, North Carolina. So he's got some of the same areas that I have pegged, but again, my leaning is Texas this year and the Western Caribbean Sea, and then something riding up the Eastern Seaboard, and then maybe you might get a tropical storm or something late in the season shooting for the Northern Gulf. But that's what their thinking is anyway. All right, so I've showed you this graphic before, and I'm not using this for bragging rights, but just to kind of give you a comparison. I haven't updated this in a few years, so this is based on, since 2013. I put myself in the middle of this because these companies refuse to even acknowledge my predictions, which, considering my lack of credentials, you could say, okay, leave him out. But when you consider the accuracy of my predictions, you got to put him in. It's okay. Credentials, no. Accuracy, better than all of them. So I put myself in here, and if you look at how many named storms that I pick on an average year, I'm tied with WeatherBell and AccuWeather. CSU has been off by 7 named storms on average, and TSR has been off by 5 named storms on average. The cumulative group of us have been off by 4.8 named storms every year. So the track record hasn't been very good for predicting how many named storms there's going to be in the Atlantic Basin. It hasn't really been that great. And I know I've left some people out there. I don't have Rob in there, and I don't have some other companies in there. These are just the ones that I just plucked out. And again, I haven't updated this in several years, but this is from 2014, 15, and 16, 13, 14, 15, and 16. So 2016, I predicted 14. We ended with 14. 2014, I predicted 9 to 11. We ended up with 8, so I was only 1 off. 2015, 6 to 8. I was off 6. I'm sorry, 6. What am I looking at here? Yeah, I was off 6 to 8 named storms. You know what? I can't remember my methodology on this. I'm going to skip this graphic. I should have studied up on that a little more, but I haven't updated it in a few years. I don't remember what the exact criteria was on that. So anyway, that's the situation for my predictions. Again, 18 to 20 named storms, high risk for the Western Caribbean and the coast of Texas. Later in the season, I'm concerned for the Northern Gulf, Eastern Seaboard. I do have Miami number 7 this year in South Florida. Not real keen on that pick. It's statistically it's lining up, but if you add up all my top 20, the Canadian Maritimes, Texas, Western Caribbean is where you got to be thinking for this hurricane season. Want to make sure I'm not forgetting anything here. Let me go through my notes. I mentioned everything. All right, so I'm going to wrap it up here, folks. We've been on the air for we've been on an hour and 40 minutes. Again, Jim Williams, HurricaneCity.com. Good luck this year, everybody. Take advantage of the tax-free holiday on your hurricane supplies. Be ready. You're in the Western Caribbean, batten down the hatches. I know I said that last year, but again, just because it didn't happen that year. Remember, Abaco was high risk. I had it last year and the year before. And then, not last year, the year before last, and the year before that. And then, sure enough, it got hit last year. I had it at number 6, but it was in my top 5 2 years ago. So I've had the Caribbean, Western Caribbean. I've had the Caymans, and I think Cancun in my top 20 the last couple of years. But this year, I'm really thinking something bad's going to happen down there. So let's hope that doesn't happen. But if you're watching tonight, everybody be ready. It could hit anywhere. We might not have any majors. We might not have any hurricanes hit the U.S. They could recarve on out. But it's going to be active. That I can guarantee. I think it's going to be active. I don't think we're going to end up with this, with a 10 name storm season or something. That would be one for the ages, because everybody's at the high end of the teens this season. And if we end up with 10 or 12 name storms, everybody would be a laughing stock. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think we're going to have a very active hurricane season, and I think we're going to have some significant hits. We're going to have some deaths. And as I said at the beginning of the show, I don't care if we had 5 Category 5 hurricanes hit the United States. It's not going to be as bad as COVID-19. Period. We're not going to have as high of a death toll. In fact, the United States record, I think, is what, 8 to 13,000 died in the Great Galveston hurricane in 1900. Hurricane Mitch, we had about that many people die down there in Central America back in 1998. In fact, that's my hurricane season kickoff logo is Hurricane Mitch. There's been some high death toll hurricanes, but nothing like the 105,000 people that we've seen die from COVID-19. We're going to be back in that pandemic again at the height of it, at the height of the hurricane season. I fear it's going to be bad again. And you need to make a plan. Where are you going to go? Make plans with neighbors and friends out of your area so that you have somewhere to go. So you do not have to burden the government system right now. It can't take it. We're brought to our knees right now. We have a lot of problems going on. Make plans to evacuate to friends, relatives' houses out of state. Hotels are going to be booked. We see it every time there's a hurricane, the hotels are booked. I don't know how FEMA is going to book all these hotels all over the country for the hurricane season. Maybe they can afford to do that. I don't know. But we'll see what happens. But have your PPEs ready. Have your mask ready. Wear a mask, people, please. If you're going to eat, I know you got to take it off to eat. If you're inside of a building, wear your mask. It's so dangerous inside buildings right now. I know there's people who are saying, well, this thing is, it's only a few people. And listen, I think it's been about 5% of the population. Last time I checked, you're talking millions of people have been affected by this. It's just that they haven't been tested. But you got to protect yourself. Wear a mask until they have a vaccine. And let's hope they have the right vaccine and they don't rush it, but it'll be ready next year. And maybe next hurricane season we can, get out of this situation and just focus on hurricanes next year, not COVID-19. But it's going to be here through the hurricane season, so be prepared for that. Anyway, good luck this hurricane season, everybody. I'll be back when there's a hurricane, a major threat to the United States. Myself and Bill Phillips will be covering it. When there's a major in the Caribbean, we'll be covering it. It may not even have to be major for the United States for us to cover it. It depends on where it's going and where it's hitting and whether I have the time and Bill has the time and, all that has to factor in. But check out the archives. This show will be archived, by the way, on the archive page. Good luck this hurricane season, everyone. I'm Jim Williams. Thank you for watching.